Hey, rough and tumblers, Father Mitch here. Please pardon my laryngitis. So, welcome to the third week of Metalcraft Month 2025, Imperium Armorum. It's important to remember that command and mastery of the weapon exists independent of the finer detailed skills. So an example of that is a carpenter uses a hammer. So if the carpenter can learn to use a hammer to drive a nail without hitting his thumb, without bringing it back and putting out his own eye, without losing control of the hammer and allowing it to harm someone else, that's command and mastery of the hammer. Once the carpenter has learned command and mastery of the hammer, then he can learn finer skills of carpentry, such as how to frame a home or something of that nature. But you have to have command and mastery. So this is a little constitutional that's going to help get command and mastery into you. You can learn the finer details later, but you need to be able to move around the environment with the stick, not hit yourself with the business end, not drop it, have the strength to be able to fight with it, to squeeze with it, and so on. So what I'd like for you to do is go through 7 rounds of this, 1 minute each, 3 times. So it's 7 minutes, 7 minutes, 7 minutes. And so the rounds I'd like for you to do are as follows. So round 1, I'd like for you to come in and I'd like for you to do a talon squeeze. This is the talon. It's the fist distance left over at the bottom of the cane after you hold it. And this is used in grappling. So I want you to get your imaginary opponent, place the talon against his body. Get here and then squeeze as hard as you can for a full minute. If you get exhausted, then you can let go. You can switch hands and you can go to the other hand if you like. But a full minute, do not pace yourself. Maximum power. Then the next thing I want you to do is I want you to strike it. Now we're working at close range this week. So I want you to strike it for a full minute. And I want you to use your bayonet strikes like this. I want you to rack it, bracing strikes, hit, 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 and go ahead and really ladle it with these strikes. You can practice these, your palm followed by your talon strike. Just really get after it for the full minute. The next minute, I want you to encircle the bag. I want you to get really low. I want you to squeeze the bag. Try not to break your stick. Hold it properly in this hand, but you can choke up on this side. Get low, pick it up, and then I want you to squat and do as many squats as you can for the full minute. The next thing I want you to do is push-ups. So now I want you to get into your push-up position, knuckle down, and then you can do these on your toes or you can do them on your knees. You do your own fitness level, and then do a full minute of those. And I want nipple contact to the stick. Down, and then push fast. 1, 2, 3, push. 1, 2, 3, push. If you gas, take a break for about 7 breaths or about a 12 count, and then complete the minute. The next exercise I want you to do is a jackknife. So for jackknife, I want you in this position, and I want you to sit up, and then hit the bag. And then hit sit, and then hit the bag. 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 For a full minute. And then I want you to do some plank rows. After your plank rows, then I'd like for you to go back in and hit it for another minute. That's 7 rounds. So it is talon squeeze, hit, squats, push-ups, jackknives, plank rows, another minute of hitting, and then you start all over again. Go through that 3 times. That'll be 21 minutes of action, and the only breaks you should get are when you gas. You can take a 12 count break or a 7 quick breaths before you do another set. And the only other break you get is when you transition between exercises. So I want you to try that out. And I would say, I would advise doing a weapon constitutional like that with your chosen weapon, such as your cane. And I practice doing that at least once a month or so you maintain your command and mastery of your weapon. Now it's Imperium Armorum this month, and so that is weapon mastery. So the weapons of the body are different than the weapons of the mind and the weapons of the spirit. I want you to remember the words of St. Paul in the first letter to the Thessalonians 5:8. St. Paul says, "Let us be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and the helmet that is hope for salvation." So I want you to remember, brothers and sisters, that fighting isn't everything. There's a time to fight with your hands. There's also a time to fight with your mind and your spirit. And there's a time to fight with the world and the powers that be, but there's also a time to fight with yourself. To remind yourself of who you are and what you're up to. And that's something you should be doing daily. And journaling is an essential part of that. And that's why it's central to Heritage Rough and Tumble. Because remember, as we discussed at the beginning of the month, that we are at once rough and tumblers. In other words, we are, I guess, sort of like savages. But we're also in a tuxedos. So we are trying to be the best of the best. So we're trying to be smart, intelligent, educated, and so on. But if we're called upon to defend our families, then we want to be as strong and as effective as possible. Now let's break down the quote by St. Paul. He says, "Let us be sober." And so when I mean sober, I think St. Paul wants us to be discreet, sensible, and possessed of self-control. So when we give in to our unruly passions, then we never fail to become unmoored from our moral precepts, and that causes us to do things we should not do. This is where serious errors begin, as well as minor lapses in judgment. So we can never be perfect, but we can try to watch ourselves for the small cracks, for the petty annoyances, frustrations, grumpinesses, sarcasms, and so on. The snark, okay? The crude banter, the eye rolling, the disdain, all of that stuff. Those are the stress fractures that occur before we lose our sobriety completely. And we lose our tempers, we say things we shouldn't say, and then we have regrets. Putting on the breastplate of faith and love, I would say the important thing to remember here is that the best way to avoid eating unhealthy food isn't fasting, but rather to substitute a healthier choice. So in a similar way, the best defense against negative behaviors isn't inaction, but substituting positive behaviors, okay? So rather than pushing down on your faults all the time, which is really temporary, then try to lift yourself up with faith and love. Faith isn't merely professional belief, in other words, I believe in, being able to read the Apostles' Creed or something. That's not what it is. Faith is trust and belief in action. Okay? So trust that God is love, that good wins in the end, and act accordingly. Believe that love conquers all. Work with it and let it work in you. And then finally, he says the helmet that is the hope for salvation. So, too often our heads get battered by negativity and the pressures of the day to day, and we lose our hope. We become unhappy, discouraged, and become depressed. Money problems, personal problems, employment problems, political nonsense, current events, relationship difficulties, all of that. They all seem to really conspire to make us feel fatalistic. But if we love God and keep the faith, we can rest in the promise of life everlasting. Friends, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. And that is, of course, John 16:33. So, brothers and sisters, put on the breastplate of faith and love, and the helmet of the hope of salvation. And those weapons, that armor, will defend you more effectively than anything you will ever do against your heavy bag. Take care, and God bless.